Tomas, thanks for coming on. I really appreciate you taking the time to have a conversation with me. Would you mind telling us a little bit about yourself before we get started?
Sure. I'm an associate professor of philosophy. I started studying philosophy after I did a biology undergrad degree. I switched to philosophy. So about 20 years ago now, I switched to philosophy. Got my PhD in 2011, and then I've just been teaching since then.
Awesome. And you wanted to talk about evolution and moral beliefs, evolutionary arguments.
Well, yeah. When I received the invitation, which was very kind, thank you. I was given a sort of menu of your views, and then I guess the suggestion was, can talk about any of these things. And I saw that one of your views was atheism, and another one of your views was moral realism, which, I mean, I don't think there's a contradiction there, but it is, I don't know. Some people think there's a tension there. And I've written a paper about what I think is a tension there. And so I thought I could share that today.
Cool. And you wanted to show slides? You can do those, I think.
Yes.
I hope.
Yeah, I brought you some slides. I brought you the sort of gift that philosophers give each other, which is an objection to your views.
Cool.
All right, so let me share my screen here. Can you see that?
Yes.
Okay, and if I made this full screen, that's even better. Okay, so you can see this slide, right? An evolutionary debunking argument for TJump. By the way, would you like me to call you TJump or Tom?
TJump is what most people call me. I really don't care. You can call me Master King of the Universe at work.
All right. Let's stick with TJump. Okay, so this will just be really quick. I thought we could just state your view, and you can tell me if I get anything wrong. But then towards the end, I want to present you with what's called an evolutionary debunking argument. So I'll explain what that is. But first, let me make sure I understand your view. I watched some of your old videos, drawing from this video up in the upper right there. I think your moral theory has two components. You have a view about moral epistemology, and then you also have a view about moral metaphysics, about what the moral facts are. And when it comes to epistemology, you say things like, the best of all possible worlds would be a world that has no involuntary restriction of will. And so I think what you're doing is, if somebody asks you, how do you know what's right and wrong, good and bad, you imagine an ideal state of affairs, the best way things could be. And you call that the best of all possible worlds. And in your mind, when you do that, you think the best of all possible worlds is one where people's wills are unobstructed. They can basically do what they want all the time. I guess as long as they're not hurting anybody else. We don't want them to restrict other people's wills. But yeah. And you say if we can know what actions would be moral or immoral in the best of all possible worlds, then we can know those actions are objectively moral or immoral in all possible worlds. And that would give us grounds for objective moral laws. So again, I think this is how you're forming conclusions about what's good and bad, right and wrong.
Are you changing slides? Because I don't see the slides changing.
Oh, I did change a slide. Yeah.
Let's see.
You can't see this?
I'm still seeing the title screen, an evolutionary debunking argument.
Oh, I'm seeing something that says TJump's moral theory.
Try unsharing and reshare. Oh, I think it's because you went to full screen. Try taking it off for full screen. Yeah, now I see it.
Okay, maybe I can just make this bigger and I don't have to go into presentation mode. I could just do it like this. But then we won't get the cool animations. But that's all right. Okay, so here's your epistemology. You can see this, yeah, this epistemology stuff.
Yep.
And then if we were to ask you what are the moral facts, you say the objective moral standard can be defined as all wills should have sovereignty over themselves. And to say that something's objectively immoral is to say that there's some kind of involuntary restriction of will going on. So I think that's the view. You do have a little more to say about epistemology, though. Yeah, some animations would be nice because this is too much text, but I'm worried I'll lose you if I share the screen, or yeah, make the screen full size. So we'll just read this together. Okay, so you have some things to say about moral intuition. And that's really what I'd like to focus on. So you say that when you're forming these beliefs about what the best of all possible worlds is like, you're relying on moral intuition. And moral intuition, you say, is essentially just, this is what feels right. We can't prove it absolutely, but we can use our sensations and feelings in order to make a judgment, and then use that judgment to try to say, well, how does it feel to you? How does it feel to you? How does it feel to you? Get some confirmation from other people. And you say if we can get some really core similarities between our descriptions of how they feel, we can generalize that into saying that this is probably a description of reality, not just a description of our subjective interpretations. So the reason I'm highlighting bits about feelings and sensations and interpretations is I think what you're expressing here is a view that I would call representationalism, according to which we have these things that you're calling intuitions that represent to us what the moral landscape is like, what the moral facts are. You say just one more thing that I'll share. You say this intuition isn't itself a moral fact. It's just what we have access to, kind of like vision. If we see an illusion, or if we see a picture or a painting, it could be an illusion or it could be the real thing. And so our intuition is the thing that we use to make guesses as to what it is we're seeing in the case of morality. So I think the idea is something like this. If we were to transport you to Paris in your chair, here you are in the Louvre looking at the Mona Lisa. In the case of vision, I think you'd say it works something like this. Light bounces off the Mona Lisa, impinges on your retinas, causes certain events in your visual cortex, and then you get an experience as of the Mona Lisa. And it's on the basis of that experience that you form the belief there's the Mona Lisa. But this experience is a representation. You're not directly in contact with the Mona Lisa. You're relying on this intermediary, this report, this representation. And it's the sort of thing that could be present even in the case of hallucination or illusion. Even if the Mona Lisa weren't actually there, you could still have this experience as of the Mona Lisa. Okay, and I think the idea is the same thing's happening with moral intuitions. Here you are observing a case of an involuntary restriction of will. This kid's in timeout. He's not allowed to move even though he wants to. And I think what's happening is something like the case of vision. This causes in you a moral intuition, a kind of representation. You get a feeling of repulsiveness or discomfort, and it's on that basis that you form the judgment that this is bad or this is wrong. Okay, so I think that's how moral intuition works on your view. So here comes the evolutionary debunking argument, but I was interested to see that you've actually used evolutionary debunking arguments yourself. So another one of your claims is that the world, nature, can be moral or immoral. The world itself can be moral or immoral. For example, if a rock falls on you, that would be a case in which the world itself is immoral because it's restricting your will. But you anticipate this objection. You imagine somebody saying, but surely morality requires agency. How could nature be moral or immoral? How could we evaluate nature morally if nature is not even an agent? And you respond with an evolutionary debunking argument. And what you're trying to do is undermine the intuition that morality requires agency by pointing to certain facts about our evolutionary history. So here's what it looks like. This is your slide. I'm highlighting the relevant bit. You say, because evolution selects for survival rather than truth, any intuition that is purely evolutionarily inspired would not necessarily describe objective morality. This is why I believe we should dismiss the intuition that morality requires agency. Okay, so you say evolution selects for survival rather than truth. That's why any intuition that's purely evolutionarily inspired wouldn't necessarily describe objective morality. That's why we should dismiss this intuition. So here's how I think the argument's going. You start by saying evolution selects for survival, not truth. You say that's why any intuition that is purely evolutionarily inspired would not necessarily describe objective morality. And you say that's why we should reject any intuition that's purely evolutionarily inspired. And you say one such intuition is the intuition that morality requires agency. You think that's purely evolutionarily inspired. So you say we should dismiss that intuition. So this is an evolutionary debunking argument. You're saying, like, given what we know about our evolutionary history, there are some things we just shouldn't trust, namely those intuitions that are, as you put it, purely evolutionarily inspired. But my worry for you, and then this will be the last slide, is won't this extend on your view to every moral intuition that we have? Aren't we the products of evolution? Isn't everything about us evolutionarily inspired? Aren't all of our moral intuitions, won't they all have an evolutionary explanation? But if that's the case, then we can extend this argument, just use those same first three premises that you used. But then instead of trying to undermine the intuition that morality requires agency, try to undermine one of the intuitions that you like, one of the intuitions that you think is true. The intuition that, for example, involuntary restriction of will is bad. Won't that also be purely evolutionarily inspired? But if so, then we should dismiss that intuition as well. In which case, what I'm saying is, I think you've lost your grounds for believing in objective moral laws. But I guess I'll just quickly hasten to add, I don't want you to give up moral realism. I'm really happy that you're a moral realist.
Oh yeah, if I could just jump in there, I'd be like, yes, intuitions aren't evidence of objective morality. Intuitions are data points that we use to try to make a hypothesis. So all of our intuitions can be explained by morality. That is a potential explanation for all of the moral intuitions. So the moral intuitions on their own aren't good evidence of objective morality. What I think is good evidence for objective morality is I have a hypothesis that explains these, that makes predictions, and if those predictions come true, that's good evidence of objective morality. So it's the predictions part, and if those are confirmed, that would be the sufficient evidence. The intuitions on themselves are not. Those are just data points. It's like if you see a cup fall over, like what caused the cup to fall over? I think it was a magical leprechaun. You can't use the fallen cup as the evidence of the magical leprechaun. That's the thing we're explaining. You need some new data point in the future. So I agree that all of the intuitions can be explained by evolution. And so we shouldn't just believe because intuitions, therefore objective morality. We should say, here's a bunch of data points, which are the intuitions, and I can create a hypothesis to explain these, make a future testable prediction that if my hypothesis is that it's explained by leprechauns or whatever, we'll see this thing in the future. And then if that's confirmed, that would be good evidence of whatever your hypothesis is.
Okay, let me see if I understand. So you were saying moral intuitions are not themselves evidence. They are data points. And then we use those data points to test hypotheses. Is that right?
To come up with hypotheses. Then after we come up with a hypothesis, we have to make up a new prediction that isn't a data point that we're going to discover in the future that will become a data point. And then if that confirms the evidence, then it would be evidence of our hypothesis.
Okay, so moral intuitions are data points. And then you say we use those data points to come up with hypotheses. And then we test the hypotheses by gathering some evidence.
Making predictions.
We test hypotheses by making predictions, and then we see if those predictions are true or false by gathering evidence?
Yeah, observation. We observe to see if the prediction comes true. And if the prediction comes true, that's good evidence of your hypothesis.
Hypotheses. Make a prediction, and then we make some observations. Can you tell me about these observations that you would make that would test your moral hypotheses?
Mine is that all conscious entities in the universe, whether they evolved or not, would all come up with a similar model of morality.
All conscious entities.
With a sufficient level of intellect.
Would come up with this theory of morality?
A theory of morality that would fall along the spectrum that would go in this line, yeah.
A theory of morality that would fall along the spectrum that would go in this line?
Yeah, so the prediction is that as we gain more intellect and more resources, the scope of morality increases, and so we see any involuntary imposition of will as being more immoral. So like moral progress is another part of my argument where I say that over time, as we gain more resources, things that we didn't see as immoral in the past, we see as immoral now. And the reason is because it's an involuntary imposition of will. And the more resources we have, the less of those are required. And so the more of them we see as immoral. And so if we had infinite resources, that would lead to something like the best of all possible worlds. And so if we found another species with this comparable intellect, wherever they were on this model, they would see a comparable amount of involuntary positions of will as immoral wherever they were on that spectrum.
So you were saying those are the observations that you're using to test the predictions of your hypothesis.
Yes, if we discovered like AIs discovered the similar pattern of morality, and aliens from different planets had a similar pattern of morality, that would be good evidence that
Okay.
morality was more than just a product of human evolution.
Okay, so we start with some data points. These are these moral intuitions, and the moral intuitions that you're having are like when you reflect on that kid in timeout. Should
Yeah.
I stop sharing my screen? Am I still just sharing my screen?
Yeah, I don't know. Is there more slides? I can do it.
Oops, I just closed the thing that had a button that said stop sharing, and now I don't know how to stop sharing anymore.
Well, I can stop sharing on my screen, so you can just.
Okay. Yeah, oh, wait, I see it now. Okay, stop sharing. Am I still sharing my screen?
No.
Okay. Okay, so let me just, again, make sure I understand. So you say we have these moral intuitions, and one example of a moral intuition would be you look at that kid in timeout and you're like, that's wrong. What's happening there? That involuntary restriction of will is wrong. And then you come up with a hypothesis. And I guess the hypothesis is all involuntary restrictions of will are wrong.
Yes, I think.
Okay, all involuntary restrictions of will are wrong. And then you make a prediction, and in order to test this hypothesis, you make a prediction, and the prediction is all conscious creatures would come up with a theory of morality that would fall along the spectrum that would be along these lines or something like that. Other conscious creatures are going to agree that all involuntary restriction of will is wrong.
No. So again, the prediction is that at the end of the day, if we're fully evolved, we have 100% resources, we will get to this point where we all see any involuntary position is wrong. Until we get to that point, we're going to be along a spectrum. The closer we are, the more involuntary positions we're going to see as wrong. The further we are from having enough resources, the less there's going to be many that we're going to see as not wrong. So like slavery, women's rights, LGBT rights, whatever. There's lots of examples of involuntary positions that we don't see are wrong in the past because of we didn't have enough resources to justify or to allow that group to have some rights or something. And as we gain resources, and it's no longer any justifiable reason to withhold rights from others, then we start to see that involuntary position or withholding that from others as being immoral. And so as we gain more resources, we get closer to the extreme, which is the imaginary best of all possible worlds, in which case we would all see involuntary positions as being immoral. The prediction is that any species we discover is going to be on this spectrum somewhere. And the more resources they have and the more intelligence they have, the more involuntary impositions they see are wrong. So, like, if we discovered an alien species that's 10,000 years more advanced than us, they're going to see things like eating animals as immoral or spanking children as immoral. So, things that we see as justified now, a society that is more advanced than us will see as immoral. So, any involuntary imposition will gradually become to be seen as immoral the more technologically advanced you become, up until the extreme of the best of all possible worlds, which all of them are.
Okay. So you said something like the prediction is going to be something like the more we evolve, but you cash that out as the more resources we gain. And so I guess the more well off a civilization is or a group of entities are, the more well off they are, the more resources they have, the more they will agree that all involuntary restrictions are wrong.
No, the more involuntary impositions they will see as immoral. Whether they recognize it or not is irrelevant. They may define it differently, but it will be the case that they will see more involuntary impositions as immoral, regardless of what they define it as.
Well, yeah, that's what I was trying to say, but
All right.
thank you for clarifying. The more they will see. Okay, well, I was going to point out that like I don't agree with you about all involuntary restrictions of will being wrong, but I guess you would say I'm just not sufficiently evolved, or I'm a dinosaur or something like that. So I guess that wouldn't be contrary evidence because you could just say there will be holdouts, but nevertheless, the more we evolve, the more resources we gain. We're approaching a consensus, and the consensus is your hypothesis. All involuntary restrictions of will are wrong. Okay, so I think I understand the view. Just going back to the first point, I guess the argument I was giving you was with respect to the things you're using as data points. You say, I've got these moral intuitions and those are my data points. And we're using those to build hypotheses. So I guess my worry is then if you found out that, for example, you're in a lab and you find out that your microscope is unreliable, or you find out that some scale you're using is unreliable, or some other instrument that you're using is unreliable, you would no longer accept the deliverances of that instrument as data points. So what I was trying to point out is on your view, where you're combining moral realism with a kind of atheism or naturalism, and you think evolution is unguided, unsupervised, interested only in adaptive behavior, not truth. I thought what you would have discovered is, from your perspective, what you've discovered is this little instrument in my head that I'm using to form judgments about morality is unreliable. It's not really interested in the truth. It's interested only in adaptive behavior. So then why are we using it to generate data points? Wouldn't that be as silly as using a broken microscope to generate data points?
You can use anything you want to generate data points. The data points don't matter. You can make up a hypothesis of any kind. So like if you see a fallen cup, you say, what knocked over the cup? A magical farting leprechaun. Like, that's fine.
Well, the data point is the fallen cup there.
Yeah, and it could just be imaginary. It could be something in your head, could be nothing, could be real. It makes no difference. What matters is, does the hypothesis make predictions which are correct? And it doesn't matter. Your data points could be completely wrong, made up, but if it ends up leading to future testable predictions which are correct, you have evidence regardless of the data points. Who cares about the data points? So the data points are just a way to build a hypothesis. And you can build a hypothesis any way you want. You can just literally just make it up. You don't even need data points. You can make up a hypothesis using anything you want.
Okay.
And so the way you gain data points or how you use the data points, it just doesn't matter. What matters is can you make a hypothesis? Does it make predictions? Do they get correct?
Okay, so then, yeah, maybe I misunderstood a bit of your moral epistemology. So you weren't saying that the moral intuitions give you reason to think that involuntary restriction of will is wrong. It sounds like we might agree that these moral intuitions you're relying on are unreliable because they're the product of evolution. I mean, in the slides that I quoted from you, you say we should dismiss them. But I guess you wouldn't say that now. You're saying, no, I can use them in order to generate hypotheses, but I shouldn't expect them to be reliable indications of truth. They're probably unreliable. But I'll generate a hypothesis using these unreliable data points. And as long as my observations confirm the hypothesis, then I'll have grounds to believe the hypothesis. Is that right?
Well, sort of.
You're breaking up a little bit. Am I breaking up or are you breaking up? You froze. Hey, chat. Can the chat tell me if I froze or if TJump froze? Froze TJump. Tom is frozen. Okay, so it's him, yeah? Okay, I'm fine. Okay. Well, story time, I guess. Any questions from the chat? Or suggestions for what I should say next? He's frozen. God didn't like it. Yeah. Oh, hypothesis. God's angry with TJump. I got a data point here. TJump froze. Hypothesis. God's angry. Tell you a story. I don't know.
Oh, sorry about that. That was my end. Automatic Windows update thing.
Oh.
But anyway, so what we were talking about. Oh, flip this around. Yeah, I haven't done much on my computer lately, and so it has all these stupid updates it wants me to do. All right. So what you're saying is like data points don't have any reliability. They're just data points. So like
on your view, yeah.
On any view, it's just the data point doesn't tell you what caused the thing. So you have an experience of a cup falling over. That could be caused by you being in the matrix. that would explain the data point, or having a delusion, or the cup actually fell over, or a farting leprechaun caused it to fall over. It tells us nothing. It tells us absolutely nothing.
Well, I guess it depends on what the data point is. If the data point is just, it seems to me that the cup has fallen over, then yeah, I guess it doesn't really matter if I'm in the matrix or whatever. But if the data point instead is the cup has fallen over, then I'm going to need reason to think that my instrument is working well. The instruments are my eyes. My eyes are the ones that let me see. My eyes are the things that let me see that this cup fall. And so the eyes better be reliable in order for me to use this as a data point that the cup fell.
Well, until we have access of like the Kant's noumena, and we can literally have direct access to reality, then the only data points we have are through experience or qualia of some kind.
Oh, no, I don't think that's right. But we don't really need to argue about that, because you're going to say that the data points you're using when you do ethics are just, it seems to me that involuntary restriction is wrong.
Well, I'm not.
Involuntary restriction of will is wrong.
Well, do you think there's another kind of data point other than things we get through our brains?
Well, I think that sometimes the things that our brains tell us are true. And I would have thought that scientists do this all the time. So if you're out there observing some wild rabbits or something, the data point might be these two rabbits are friends now, or something. I don't know. No, I'm Jane Goodall with the chimpanzees. My data point might be these chimpanzees have become allies. It's not that I'm having an experience as of the chimpanzees becoming allies. She just sort of trusts that the observations she's making of the real world are true. And then she tries to explain, why are these chimpanzees allies?
That's the same thing. So it's still going to be, the data point is still, she has an experience. She just hasn't, like, yeah, I grant the experience.
No, I was thinking that her data point is the chimpanzees have become allies, not it appears to me I'm having a visual experience as of allied chimpanzees. She just assumes that the data point is the chimpanzees have become allies. And I would have thought the same thing happens in a lab. Like, you report that when I ran this gel, I got this result. And the data point is the result, not I'm having a visual experience as of a piece of film that reports to me that such and such.
As far as I know, it's just
it's not. I don't know if much turns on this, because I'm granting that on your view, the data points that you're referring to are just seemings, are just intuitions.
Well, to me, it just seems like an absolutely terrible way to try to curtail in some kind of extra epistemic way to skirt in information you don't need. Like, no, seems like in science, the data point is you have a sense experience. And then we have to say, well, was the microscope working? We don't know. Maybe it was a delusion. We don't know. And you literally have to question all of those things. That's part of the scientific method. So we don't just say, I just trust my experience. That seems like a terrible epistemology. But either way, like, we both grant that it comes to you through mental experience of some kind. Whether you explicitly state it in the argument is irrelevant. But as far as I know, there is no data point that comes to you outside of mental experience. They all have to do that.
I definitely didn't mean to say that it doesn't matter whether your instruments are well calibrated. No, I mean, that's why we get that methods section in scientific papers. Like, here are the methods I used to try to ensure the reader that the methods I used were reliable. So when I tell you that, this population of fish was wiped out, you can trust me that the population of fish was actually wiped out. I don't just have to report that it seemed to me that the population of fish was wiped out. So yeah, I hope you didn't hear me as saying that.
Well, the part I was objecting to was the we assume that it's true part. That part I don't grant. No. Like, there's idealists who do those things, and people who believe there's psychic powers, and so they don't assume those are true, and they publish papers on them. So that's not a part of science to assume those are true. It's just, you can put that in the hypothesis, which is fine.
To assume that our senses are generally reliable, that's no part of science, you say?
No, that's something that we came to from other evidence that's in prior data. It's just something you assume.
So when people are doing science, like in a lab, you don't think they just take for granted that their basic cognitive faculties are reliable?
No, that's something that had to be demonstrated by past evidence. So there's past evidence, reason to believe that. They don't just assume it. No.
So we're about to fall down a deep hole of epistemic circularity, and that the worry that you can't confirm your cognitive faculties by using your cognitive faculties. And I'm worried that will be a deep rabbit hole that we don't need to go down. I'm willing to grant that the data points you're using when you construct your moral hypotheses are just intuitions, and you're not making any claims that these intuitions are reliable representations of reality. Should we just proceed on that
Sure.
understanding? Okay. Okay, so you start with these data points, which you admit are deliverances. They're purely evolutionarily inspired. In previous work, you said we should dismiss anything like that, but now you're saying, no, don't dismiss them. Let's in fact use these as data points to generate hypotheses, because it doesn't really matter what you use to generate hypotheses. You say you can literally just make them up from nothing. Okay, so you come up with the hypothesis, all involuntary restrictions of will are wrong. And then you say what would confirm this is if I made some observations of conscious entities as they evolve and progress and gain more resources, if they reach this consensus, that would confirm my hypothesis that all involuntary restrictions of will are wrong. That's the idea.
Sort of, yeah.
Oh, well, then my worry is if the observations that we're making in order to confirm this hypothesis are observations of entities that themselves are the products of evolution, and we know that there are evolutionary reasons to think that they're going to have intuitions like the ones you're having. I'm not having these intuitions, but the ones that you're having. Then why think that observing that entities that have evolved tend to have certain kinds of evolutionarily inspired intuitions confirms that those intuitions are true? I mean, you're granting in your own case, there's no reason to think these intuitions are true. So why would observing that other people are having the intuitions as well confirm that the intuitions are true?
Future testable predictions confirms your hypothesis no matter what it is. So if you make future predictions of things we don't know yet, things we don't expect, and it ends up being true, that's evidence of your hypothesis, even if it's minimal. But the key there is I said any conscious entity, including AIs that didn't evolve. So non-evolutionary beings would also have that.
Yeah. I think it's going to be tough because they're still going to have origins and they're still going to have programming. There's still going to be some explanation why they have the moral intuitions that they have or the moral beliefs that they have. And this would be well out of my lane to speculate about the sort of moral beliefs that an AI will form. So maybe we could just stick with naturally evolved organisms. I feel like I have a better grip on that.
Well, that's kind of one of the arguments is to show it's why is this not just a product of evolution? Well, because it's going to also be the case in non-evolutionary species, pulse membranes.
Okay, so, well, I guess we can just wait until we make those observations, right?
Well, yeah. So I don't claim that we've had
so
any
far,
of these observations.
So far, all we've observed is that humans, well, on your view, some humans. Again, I don't think that all involuntary restrictions of will are wrong, and I don't think the best possible world is one in which everybody gets to do what they want all the time. In fact, I think that could be a really horrific kind of world full of moral vices and terrible people. But I guess, again, you're just going to set me aside and say,
well, no, I'm including you. I'm including you in the thing because it's not about you. Individuals like there are psychopaths who just don't understand morality.
Okay. Are you calling me a psychopath?
maybe. It's more like the argument is that as a society evolves, like there's going to be a tendency of individuals who have different moral spectrums in the society, psychopaths to Buddha or whatever, and that the middle ground is going to tend to move towards this best of all possible worlds. And it's not whether you agree about impositions of will, that doesn't matter. The definition of it's the amount of impositions of will that you see are immoral is going to increase in the society as you gain. So whether or not you literally define it as imposition of will doesn't matter. The point is that if we look at where you are and what you believe compared to what people believed 1,000 years ago, there are more involuntary impositions of will that you think are wrong today than people did 1,000 years ago. So you're still on the spectrum.
I don't know. Maybe that's a question for the anthropologist, I guess. So, okay, you also say I'm on the spectrum and I may be a psychopath. But I like that you mentioned the Buddha.
Well, I don't actually think you're a psychopath.
I know, I was just kidding too. But I just wanted a quick shout out to the Buddha, who I think would disagree with your view that like all involuntary restrictions of will are wrong. Is that right? I don't know. I guess we should probably ask somebody who knows more about Buddhism than I do. But here was my main worry. So you've got this hypothesis that says all involuntary restrictions of will are wrong. And then you say, here's my prediction. As societies progress or evolve or gain more resources, they will approach a consensus on this question of whether all involuntary restrictions of will are wrong. So that's the empirical prediction that you're making. And open question whether that's what we're observing. But I think I have a deeper worry, which is, isn't there an alternative hypothesis that the reason we're approaching a consensus or reaching a consensus is there's going to be an evolutionary explanation of why this is. And the reason people are tending to agree on this is, on your view, these are the sort of intuitions that evolution has equipped us with. And so no surprise that as people get together and hash things out morally, we're going to reach a sort of consensus on our moral intuitions. But that's no reason, on this hypothesis that I'm giving you, that's no reason to think the intuitions are true. It's exactly what you would expect from an evolutionary perspective. We've been given these intuitions because they're adaptive, not because they're true. And this evolutionary hypothesis makes the same prediction that your moral realism makes. So yeah, now I'm wondering, why prefer your hypothesis to this moral anti-realist, purely evolutionary hypothesis?
Well, it doesn't. So the evolutionary hypothesis doesn't predict that AIs would have the same basis, and it doesn't.
We haven't observed the AIs. I guess once we observe the AIs, maybe that would be a tiebreaker. That would help us tell between your.
Well, again, so I never claimed that my hypothesis had been confirmed by predictions yet. I haven't made that claim. I've just said it made predictions. So it doesn't make the same predictions.
I thought you were a moral realist, though.
Yeah, I think that they're going to be confirmed in the future, but I have not in any way claimed they've been confirmed today, or I would deserve a Nobel Prize.
Shouldn't you just say, like, maybe one day I'll have reason to be a moral realist, but I don't now have any reason?
Well, I like it. That's why I'm a moral realist. So I don't have any. I don't have any hard evidence.
Hold up, TJump.
What?
You believe it just because you like it?
Yep. I think it's a better hypothesis. I like it better.
You believe
it? I don't claim to have any hard evidence of it. I just think it's better. I think that's a lot more rational than claiming that I have evidence I don't.
And when you say you like it, you just mean it's sort of aesthetically appealing to you?
I don't know.
I'm just wondering what you mean when you say you like it. What do you like about it?
What do I like about it? To me, it seems more correct.
But I thought we just agreed that you don't yet have any evidence.
Yeah,
so why does it seem more correct?
Because I think it's more likely that we're going to discover the evidence in the future than to not discover it in the future.
So you think it is more likely that one day we'll get evidence for this view than evidence against it?
Yes, I think the evidence is highly plausible that we're going to find it. So I think the view is true. So it's exactly like physics. Why are you a string theorist? Because I think we're probably going to find the evidence. Have you found it yet? Nope.
Oh, so and then if I asked you, why do you think it's likely that this prediction of yours is going to be confirmed? Why do you think it's likely?
Background information and priors that tend to lead to this conclusion. So same as physics. Like we look at all the evidence. What are the patterns that it seems to indicate? That seems to indicate that one. Do we have evidence for it yet? Nope. It's just where the patterns seem to lead, as far as we can tell.
Okay, so I said, why do you think it's likely that one day we'll get evidence for moral realism? One day we'll get evidence that confirms your hypothesis. You said priors and what else?
Just the background evidence of the field. So the same answer any physicist would give for any future prediction. It's like, why would you think that prediction is going to be true? Well, I'm looking at the other evidence in the field, and it leads me to this kind of direction when I do the research.
And if I don't know how far I want to press this, but if I asked you, what is this background evidence that you have that makes you so confident that one day we'll get evidence that confirms your hypothesis?
Looking at the patterns in moral intuition and moral progress and trying to discover a pattern.
Looking at the patterns in moral intuition and progress and trying to discover a pattern.
Seems to be a clear pattern, and so I think it's probably going to continue the pattern.
Okay. Yeah. So I guess what we've discovered in the last minute or two, let me just try to restate it and see if we agree. You are saying that you don't currently have reason to believe moral realism, but you are optimistic that one day we will get reason to be moral realists.
Yes, I've said that in many of my videos.
And the reason you affirm moral realism now, even though you don't have evidence for it, is you're optimistic that one day we'll get evidence for it.
I see a pattern, and I think the pattern will continue. So exactly the same as physics.
Okay. So right now, you're willing to say moral realism is true?
Most likely.
Most likely. but I don't yet have evidence to think that it's true.
I do not have any testable predictions that confirm the hypothesis. No.
Well, you have, I would have thought you have testable predictions. You
Yeah,
just
but they
don't
don't
have,
confirm the hypothesis because they haven't been found yet. For them to confirm the hypothesis, they have to be discovered.
you haven't yet confirmed the predictions.
Yes.
Okay, so you assert that moral realism is true, but you acknowledge that you don't yet have reason to think that it's true.
Yep. Just like physicists.
Okay. Yeah, I'm not so, I don't know. You keep saying just like physicists, but I would have thought that if you ask a physicist, do you believe a certain theory? They would give you reason why. And they might like point to mathematical elegance or the way it like solves certain kinds of problems. Even if it hasn't been empirically confirmed, I think they would point to other kinds of reasons.
Patterns, yeah, like just describing a pattern that they see and they think the pattern continues. So it's the same thing.
Like I would have thought like there was, correct me if I'm wrong, but like Einstein's theory of general relativity wasn't empirically confirmed for a bit. Like he proposed
Like
it.
3
People
months.
thought that's pretty okay. But think about the intervening time. There was reason to think that it's true. I mean, you might have held it tentatively, but there was some evidence before it was empirically confirmed. Once it was empirically confirmed, then we're like, now we're in business. But even before the empirical confirmation.
Well, no. So that's just different definitions of evidence there. So I don't think when Einstein came up with a theory, he didn't have any evidence. He just said, I see a bunch of data points. I can explain it like this, and I have a hypothesis. The first data point he had is when he measured the curvature of light around the sun, and that confirmed the hypothesis. So he made a prediction that this would happen.
Mhm.
And then once he confirmed it, then he now has a relevant piece of evidence. Everything else is just a data point, past data, post hoc reasoning. He looked at all the past data they had, tried to explain it in a new way. None of that is evidence his model is true yet. It's just a way he came up with to explain all the past data. So it's post hoc reasoning. And until you get that new thing, then it's not really evidence it's true. You need the confirmation of the new thing for it to be evidence.
Yeah, I don't know. Maybe again, I don't know if this is super relevant to our conversation, but I would have thought that what happened with Einstein, but I think even in the case of special relativity, because there the proofs were like largely conceptual. My understanding is not empirical, but also with general relativity, which definitely made some empirical predictions. I would have thought that the reason people were attracted to the theory and the reason Einstein himself believed it, perhaps tentatively, was various theoretical virtues like simplicity, explanatory power, or what's the word? It conforms with our background knowledge and so on. So we had all those reasons, those sort of theoretical virtues before we got the confirmed predictions.
So
But
I'm willing to grant all that, but none of that
yeah.
counts as evidence. That's all just, it feels nice to me.
Oh, none of that counts as evidence. It just feels nice to you. Oh, yeah, I don't know. Maybe we should ask a philosopher of science. But I don't, yeah, again, I don't know if it's super relevant for our conversation, because I guess what I wanted to go back to was we had agreed that your view is right now you affirm moral realism, although you say you don't currently have any evidence for it. So you think it's true, but you don't have any reason to think it's true. But I guess I just want to go back to these rival hypotheses. So we've got your hypothesis that says all involuntary restrictions of will actually are wrong. They really are wrong. There are these moral facts in the universe. And something that would confirm this is if people tended to agree, basically. Like, and the more people progress, the more they tend to agree. That will confirm the hypothesis that all involuntary restrictions of will really are wrong. A rival hypothesis is nothing's actually wrong. This is not my view. This is just what a moral anti-realist would say. Nothing's actually wrong. Things just seem wrong to us given our evolutionary history. Wouldn't that hypothesis make the same prediction? Like the more people evolve, the more they progress, there will be more and more agreement. If it really is adaptive to believe that all involuntary restrictions of will are wrong, then that trait will win out in the long run. Just like, a more adaptive beak will come to dominate a population of birds. A more adaptive moral intuition will come to dominate a population of evolved humans. So my point is just we've got these two hypotheses, the realist hypothesis and then the anti-realist hypothesis. They make the same prediction. So even if one day we made observations that confirm this prediction, why would you take that as evidence in favor of your realist hypothesis, over the anti-realist hypothesis?
Well, one, it doesn't make that predictions. You'd have to say that it's morally or it's evolutionary beneficial to believe that all involuntary positions are wrong or something like that, which is there's no reason to think that. That's not something the evolutionary basis concludes. So it'd be pretty ad hoc to essentially.
I can give you some reason.
Okay, what's the reason?
Don't you think that at the level of individuals, it would make sense for individuals to have a hardwired sort of motivation to get what they want, to think that what they want is important? Imagine two creatures, they both have wants. One of them is given this extra evolutionary boost that says, not only do you want it, but it's good that you want it, and it's wrong for people to interfere with you. Compare that to the other organism who just has the want. Which one is going to be more likely to get what he or she wants? The one with the boost, yeah?
And I don't see any difference there whatsoever. So it doesn't matter. The evolutionary advantage means you get what you want, not everybody gets what everybody wants. That would be contradictory to evolution. To say that everybody gets what everybody wants would be counterproductive to evolution. From a resource perspective, that would literally be the opposite of what evolution wants.
So I was thinking about the level of the individual. We can explain why individuals would think it is good for me to get what I want, and it's bad for people to restrict my will. Yeah. We can see why it would be adaptive for individuals to think that. Okay, now if we got a bunch of those individuals together in a society, it might be violent because everybody's going to be trying to get what he or she wants, and we're going to be imposing on other people's wills and conflicting with each other. So I would have thought that evolution also operates at the level of populations, and populations don't have genes that can survive in the next generation, but they do have things like taboos, norms, social teaching. And this is the way in which natural selection operates at the level of populations to produce what we call moral codes. And so the hypothesis is a population that adopts a moral code according to which all involuntary restrictions of will are wrong. And so that implies everybody's will counts the same, get what you want, but only if it doesn't interfere with other people getting what they want. That sort of population will do well. That will be an adaptive trait.
Because it's demonstrably false. So we know that populations like that don't succeed. The ones that conquer are the ones that do succeed. So it's direct contradiction to everything we know about evolution. The Jains who have a closest moral model to mine or whatever are not the most successful society. The ones that are the most pacifistic are not the most successful societies. It would just directly contradict any basis of evolution that we have. So it's pretty ad hoc to do that. But even let's say hypothetically you could do this. I made the prediction first, essentially. I came up with the hypothesis. You being able to post hoc say, well, I can come up with another hypothesis that can explain the same thing. Doesn't matter. I get the evidence because if my prediction made it first and we confirm it, it's evidence of my hypothesis, not yours.
Is that really true? Whoever makes the prediction first, only that hypothesis can be confirmed by the observation?
That's why Newtonian mechanics preceded general relativity. It made the predictions, even though it was wrong. It did it first. There's literally an infinitely many number of theories that can explain all data. And the ones that we accept, like materialism or whatever, came first. If idealists made the hypothesis that everything was, I don't know, a part of our mind, or we were in the matrix and they were able to make predictions first, we'd all believe we were in the matrix. Or if the Bible predicted that DNA had a double helix or whatever, then we'd all be Christians. So whoever makes the predictions first, even if it doesn't obviously connect, it has the evidence, just de facto the case.
Huh. So even if a really a scientific theory that was deficient in many ways, but made a prediction, came first, and then a much better theory that made the same prediction came second. You're saying when this prediction was confirmed, when we made observations that confirmed the prediction, that would only count as evidence for the first theory just because it happened to have been proposed first?
If the second one is simply post hoc made up the explanation because the other theory did, then yeah.
Post hoc. What do you mean? You mean post hoc after
that guy makes a prediction? What? I'm going to predict it too, just because that guy's doing it.
No, I'm supposing that the theory, the hypothesis, actually does issue that prediction. It really is a prediction of the hypothesis.
What's not? That's the problem. Hypothetically, you could say let's hypothetically think it would be, but it's just not the case. And since there isn't any reason. Like if there was a bunch of other reasons or other predictions that it made that hypothesis better, then there'd be maybe a reason to accept it. But until that case, since they're both just things we've made up, it doesn't exist.
So it was a thought experiment. So I was stipulating a few things, and what I was stipulating was very bad scientific theory that makes one prediction, much better scientific theory, a lot simpler, conforms to our background knowledge a lot more, would explain a lot more if true. That sort of theory comes along, makes the same prediction. Doesn't make it because the first theory made its prediction. It just issues this prediction. This is the sort of thing it predicts. And then we actually make some observations that confirms this prediction that both hypotheses are making. And maybe we agree that it doesn't really matter which theory came first. This observation confirms both theories, I would have thought. It doesn't confirm only the theory that came first, just because it happened to have been proposed first.
So it's not how the predictions would work. So for it to be a prediction, a novel prediction, you have to predict something that no one else predicts. If someone else already predicts it, it's not a novel prediction. So
yeah, so I agree. It would be a little sus, as the kids say, if the second theory was like looking at the first theory and saying, "Oh, you predict that? I'm going to predict it too, just because you did." But imagine these theories are proposed in vacuums. They don't know about each other. Then I guess we could agree that temporal order doesn't really matter to whether observations confirm predictions.
Let's just use a logical example. If the Bible said the world is 4.5 billion years old, the universe is 13.8 billion years old, DNA is a double helix, it doesn't matter how crappy the Bible is, everyone would be Christian. It doesn't matter if science explains everything better, we'd still mostly be Christian. If the Bible made a bunch of actually legitimate predictions, we would be Christian, even though it's a terrible hypothesis with the worst possible priors and the terrible possible explanation. It's an awful explanation. Science is better in every way, but if it made the predictions first, we'd all be Christian.
So I guess this is just an empirical hypothesis about what people would do psychologically, what they would believe. They would like the one that came first. Surely, I can't think of any off the top of my head, but surely there are examples where a really bad theory was presented first, that issued a kind of prediction, and then a much better. I mean, won't this just be the case with? I don't know. I wish I knew more about general relativity. Can we think of a case from the history of science where one theory?
Newtonian mechanics. So Newtonian mechanics was pretty bad. It was not very accurate, and it was replaced by general relativity after it made predictions that were confirmed. So most scientific theories start off bad and then get replaced by a new one because it makes new predictions.
This is, again, pretty outside of my lane. Nah, I'm not even going to say it because it's outside of my lane. But I thought I remembered learning that there is an explanation of that curvature of the light around the sun or whatever happened that confirmed Einstein's theory. I thought I heard
the extra planet thing. I think that was the.
No, I thought Einstein predicted that the light from Mercury would bend around the sun in a certain way, so that
perihelion of Mercury.
Yeah. Well, yeah, okay.
Because it was orbit of Mercury that was doing something different. So there's two different predictions there. One was the curvature of light around the sun, and the other one was the perihelion of Mercury.
Okay. Maybe I'm mixing those up.
Yeah, the perihelion of Mercury was explained by an extra planet under Newtonian mechanics. And so that one could be explained by both hypotheses. It was the sun curvature one was a different one. I don't think there was a Newtonian mechanics one. I think that was explicitly Newtonian mechanics predicted it would have a greater curve or a lesser curve or something, and that was a specific difference.
All right, we're getting pretty far into the weeds here, and I'm not even sure whether I need to prove this to myself or to you. Let me just retreat here. Oh yeah, no, I guess it was relevant because I said you've got one hypothesis, the moral realist hypothesis, that issues a certain kind of prediction that we'll see societies as they advance coming to adopt a certain moral view. And then I said, well, we've got this other kind of hypothesis that's anti-realist that looks like it's going to make the same predictions. And then you had said, well, I made mine first. So the observations will only confirm my hypothesis. And I just don't think that's true.
So
I don't
just
think it really matters.
Just to explain a little better, problem of underdetermination, there's infinitely many hypotheses that explain all data. It's just magical leprechaun farted out the universe 5 seconds ago explains everything we have, or everything we would expect to see. And you can say, I predict that if a magical unicorn farted out the universe 5 seconds ago, we're going to see, I don't know, an asteroid hit the planet at this time. And suppose it's true, that happens. If it was the first one to make the prediction, I'd count that as evidence of a magical leprechaun. I don't know how you got this information, but if you can make predictions, that counts. And then if another theory comes along and just post hoc explains the prediction after the fact with no real reason to predict it, just
so
I agree that they predicted it.
Post hoc predictions aren't as impressive as What's
Novel testable predictions.
yeah,
Novel
but like, what would the Latin way of saying that be? Pre-hoc? I don't know. It'd be better if you make the predictions ahead of
prediction
time.
instead of post-diction.
Yeah,
Prediction.
sure. There we go. It would be better if you make the predictions ahead of time, for sure. But in the current case that we're considering, like, you agree your predictions have not yet been confirmed.
Right.
And so we've got this rival hypothesis that's making the same prediction as yours. So it's not doing post hoc prediction.
Well, it seems like post hoc because it seems like you're looking at my theory and saying, I can make another one that can do the same thing. It doesn't seem like there doesn't seem to be a genuine hypothesis that leads to this from evolution.
Well, I thought we were granting that these moral intuitions you're having have an evolutionary explanation.
Sure.
There's a reason that you have them. Yeah, and so I thought that I was just considering a view where that's true, a hypothesis on which that's true. These moral intuitions have an evolutionary explanation. It is adaptive for individuals to have the intuition that they should get what they want. And also it's adaptive for populations to install certain taboos and norms according to which we should all respect each other's wills as well. Everybody's will counts the same.
Yeah, that again doesn't seem to in any way map onto how we see evolution. Because
Yeah,
again, societies that do that don't succeed.
Well, then I'm worried that there's no reason to think that your hypothesis is going to be confirmed, because surely the adaptive sort of morality is the one that's going to win out. And if you're saying that the moral code that you endorse, all involuntary restriction of will, is wrong, if you're saying that believing that is maladaptive, then why would you think that in the long run, the maladaptive beliefs are going to come to dominate the population?
Because it's a different law essentially of nature that is going to take over because it supersedes the evolutionary one under certain circumstances.
What's the law that all involuntary restriction of will is wrong?
I think morality is kind of like a law of physics, like a gravitate or a quantum wave, quantum field or something. So I think it's a literal thing in nature.
And the moral law in this case is all involuntary restrictions.
That's just words to describe the actual field. So I think it's a literal field. It causes us to do things, and it affects our brains. And the way we describe that is with that sentence.
So we describe something with the sentence, all involuntary restrictions of will are wrong. And what we're describing, you said, is a sort of force of physics. It's like
yes. So I think morality is like literally a force in physics, and it affects us. And the way it affects us jiggles our brain, sort of gives us certain feelings, desires, whatever. And the way we express those desires is with that sentence.
So this is some sort of like form of energy or something that we could test with physical instruments?
Yep. I'm a moral naturalist. I think everything is physical, natural, and measurable in every way.
Well, on my understanding, this is a pretty novel form of moral naturalism, to say the least, where we're positing a novel sort of force in physics that has not yet been discovered.
Yep.
Oh, wow. I was not prepared for that. That's new to me. Okay, so your thought is, although it is maladaptive for individuals and populations to believe, or for populations to believe that all involuntary restrictions of will are wrong, nevertheless, populations are going to approach that consensus because they're being forced or pressured or drawn by this as of yet undiscovered force of physics.
Yes, it's pretty much right.
Oh, wow. And I guess if I ask details about how this force works, you would just say, I'm not in a position to know.
Yeah, we haven't discovered it yet.
Okay.
The quantum field works in mysterious ways.
Yeah. Huh. So, well, that's gonna take care of my worry that the adaptive moral beliefs would come to dominate the population.
Yeah, because I would agree
your
with that
theory
argument.
is no.
Well, yeah. So I would agree that if evolution is true, the most morally adaptive belief is the one that's going to take over. But I don't think the most morally adaptive belief is that involuntary restrictions of will are bad, because obviously prisons are beneficial. They're involuntary positions of will. And so having prisons is evolutionarily adaptive, but contrary to my moral theory. Yeah. So I think that my moral theory is in conflict with evolution, not cooperation with it. So, and I think kind of like how gravity is 40 orders of magnitude weaker than the strong and weak forces or whatever, this this force is 40 orders of magnitude weaker than gravity, kind of a thing. And so it can only be expressed when other forces like evolution or whatever are not being the driving forces in our living existence. And so once we can mitigate the evolutionary forces by providing more resources, we can see the expressions of this law because it's not being infringed upon by the evolutionary needs of survival or something like that.
Okay, this is just going to be like a throwaway aside comment, but I'm getting some like Marxist vibes here. Like if we just if we just reached a certain level of development, solve the problem of scarcity, everybody has enough of what they need all the time, then we won't need government, we won't need prisons. We'll all just be able to do what we want all the time. So yeah, Marxist.
I don't think
vibes.
that's a Marxist thing. I think that's just literally every utopian idea ever in every society.
Yeah, well, I mean, Marx had theories like, well, what's stopping us from getting the utopia is this problem of scarcity. And if we could just solve that problem, which capitalism will solve for us, then after we forcibly redistribute all the wealth.
Wait, Marx, capitalism? Marx, I think he said not capitalism, like opposite socialism.
No, he thought that capitalism was a stage in societal development that was necessary in order to solve the problem of scarcity. Capitalism will produce more than we need. And he thought that was happening in his own day. But he said, once we get there, the next step in societal evolution is forcible redistribution. And then everybody will have all that they need all the time. We won't need government. We'll all sing Kumbaya and do what we want all the time. We don't really need to talk about Marxism. And I didn't mean to call you a Marxist. And if you don't like that label, I'm happy to just retract it. I just said, I'm seeing some parallels here with Marxism, because what you're saying is we have these populations that have certain kind of evolutionary pressures, and it's adaptive for them to have things like prisons and laws and to, discipline children and restrict people's wills in various ways. But you think if only we could get to the point where everybody has what they need all the time and there's no scarcity of resources, then there won't be evolutionary pressures on populations to have things like prisons and laws and disciplining children and so on. And everybody will just be able to do what they want all the time. And then that sort of belief will come to dominate the human population.
Sort of. Yeah, definitely not Marxist. So I'm against Marxists. I debate against Marxists all the time.
I'm anti-Marxist too. So epic handshake on the anti-Marxism.
But I don't see I think that's just generally the view most people have, that once we have sufficient resources, we don't need prisons anymore, because I can give everyone a personal force field. Then it doesn't matter if everyone has guns; they can't shoot you anyway. And so if it's literally physically impossible to commit crimes because we have enough resources that it's impossible, we won't really need prisons anymore.
Just some armchair sociology. Haven't we observed that as the United States has become more materially affluent, I'm guessing there's more people in prison than ever. There's a lot of, mass shootings. There's a whole lot of crime and depression and drug use. And it doesn't seem like having easy access to cheap food and resources is solving all of our societal problems.
Steven Pinker, Better Angels of Our Nature. If we actually do a measure of all the different things, it is actually getting better in pretty much every respect, even given how stupid America's criminal system is. Our proportion of deaths and murders today is significantly lower than it was. So
I might be right. Maybe my armchair sociology is not worth much. I was just sort of speculating, is it really true that if people had everything they wanted, they would be very cool to each other? And I guess I just wanted to voice some skepticism, because people find ways to be horrible to each other even when they don't need to.
Well, those resources would include a personal force field that would literally make it impossible for other people to harm you. So the resources are included as defensive resources. It's not just food.
Okay. I guess I just wanted to, I don't know. Here's one other thing I wanted to say, just going back to the issue of whether your prediction will actually be confirmed at one point in the future. If, as you say, this moral code that you think is true isn't adaptive, I guess I'm just wondering, well, maybe we've answered this question already. I'm just wondering, like, how would it come to dominate the human population if, imagine we've got two populations. One of them has prisons and laws and discipline, and so on your view is like adaptive, and the other one decides to adopt the everybody do what they want all the time, and we'll all just be cool with each other. Your view is like at the current moment, this one's going to lose out. This one will either destroy itself or be destroyed by its rivals, because at the current moment, this sort of social moral code is more adaptive, the one that includes prisons and discipline and so on.
Yes.
But then I guess your view is,
As we gain
we'll
resources
get
and
resources and
technology,
technology.
the constraints that make that thing more adaptive will go away.
Yeah.
So like the reason prisons are more adaptive is because people need food and don't have any, so they're going to steal your food and your money and whatever. But if they already had food and money, then it was literally physically impossible for them to steal your money or food, then there'd be no reason to have a prison anymore. It's not adaptive. It would just be a waste of money because you couldn't put anybody in it because it's literally impossible to commit crimes. And so as our resources and technology improve, then that kind of imposition will no longer be seen as justified because there's no reason to do it anymore because they can't commit the crimes anyway.
They cannot commit the crimes because of these force fields that we have?
Yeah, that would be one of the reasons. They also don't, like most crimes are committed from poverty. There's a direct correlation to poverty and crime. So if there's no poverty, there's going to be significantly less crime. And so we would no longer see it's justified to put people in prison for trying to steal bread.
We would no longer see it as justified to put people in prison for trying to steal bread. Oh, I guess I'm not seeing that. Why not? Because they already have the bread?
No, because we have significant, like if imagine we're Star Trek where we can just print bread, infinite bread machine, and just press the bread button, and somebody steals it, we wouldn't put them in prison. We just wouldn't care. We're like, all right, I'm just gonna go print some more bread.
Somebody steals the bread, you mean?
Yeah.
We wouldn't
So
put them
now
in prison.
Because our technology has increased so much that we have excess bread resources or cake resources or whatever. If someone steals it, we just don't care because it doesn't cause. We don't have a resource limit where it has a significant impact on our lives for it to make a difference that they do that. So who cares if they steal a candy bar or something? We wouldn't put them in prison for that. We would see that society is going to look back at ours and say they put kids in prison for stealing candy bars or whatever and be like, that was immoral. It's pretty bad. We can obviously see you probably shouldn't be doing that.
And if somebody's tried to steal the bread printing machine, we have a machine that prints bread printing machines too, or something like that?
Yes, definitely.
Okay. So we have everything we need all the time. And then we would no longer judge it as wrong for people to even steal stuff.
We'd still see it as wrong, but we'd see it as more wrong to punish them for it. So that's the part that's relevant to the morality.
really?
We'd see it as wrong to punish them. It's still wrong to steal other people's stuff. We would grant that's wrong because it's an involuntary position of the person you're stealing from. But we'd also see it as wrong to then put that person in prison. So that's the extreme Janus nonviolence principle. That's
okay. Maybe just one last thing here, and then I don't know. We could talk about whether it's really true that all involuntary restriction of will is wrong. Just wanted to run one case by you about your best of all possible worlds idea. But just one more idea. So suppose we've reached this point where we have everything we need all the time. And we've got not only bread printing machines, but machines that print bread printing machines and so on. Okay, and then we've got, it's called the Matrix.
Yeah, like you just press a button and it generates whatever you want.
Well, the Matrix is like a big old hallucination. There really is no bread there. So I'm imagining a world where we really do get the bread that keeps us
Matrix
alive.
that controls the actual laws of physics. There you go.
Okay, something like that. Yeah, like just, I don't know, genuine omnipotence, I guess is what you're saying. But suppose we've got two populations. Each population has all the bread that it needs and all the bread printing machines that it needs. And so they're kind of living in peace. But now suppose that, a charismatic leader rises up in the first population and starts saying like, yeah, we have everything that we need, which is cool, but wouldn't it be fun to conquer this other population and just mess with them or enslave them or oppress them? Because after all, they're different from us and inferior. I don't know. They'd find a reason. This has happened in human history. wouldn't a population like that came to adopt a moral code like that, a sort of Viking moral code, wouldn't that be a little glitch in this system? And it would be like a little virus on your view. And that would come to dominate the population. Like this population will now, you're going to say they have force fields and so they can't be conquered?
Well, yeah, the point of the infinite resources isn't just food. It's
okay. And there's no way for
space.
this population to disable the force fields of this population.
Presumably.
They wouldn't have a super force field defeater or something like that. There's a limit to the technology.
Well, yeah, I mean, assume what's most likely going to happen is that AIs are going to take over and humans just aren't going to have any relevance. Evolutionary beings will not have control over anything.
Mm-hmm.
We're going to be pandas. We're literally going to be pandas in our little nice house cages, and we're going to get fed by the AI.
Okay, or just wiped out, I guess. That would be cheaper for them. Oh, but they might be interested in us and think we're cute, like pandas.
Well, I think they're going to adopt the moral code. So they're going to say any involuntary position is wrong. We should just let them be pandas, give them food and sex videos to encourage the pandas to reproduce.
Wow.
So.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. I guess I just wonder. Won't there be the ability to just I don't know. I didn't read those Dune books or watch the Dune movies, but there's little force fields in there. But there's also ways to disable the force fields. So imagine this Viking population decides, let's disable their force fields and then mess with them.
Right.
This sort of morality.
Clarify, that's a resource. So when you say everyone has enough resources or infinite resources, the self-defense is a means of self-defense is a resource. And so to have infinite resources, it's like, can an immovable object be moved by an unstoppable force kind of a thing. So infinite resources would imply that same dynamic, that you have an infinite resources self-defense shield.
Yeah, I think what we're bumping up into is a paradox of one kind of paradox of omnipotence is you couldn't have two omnipotent beings or populations.
Right. There's no omnipotence in mind. It's just equal forces. So if they have a force of 100 and you have a shield of 100 defense, that's fine. So there's no omnipotence required.
The force that you're proposing is like unlimited force, like impenetrable shields, but also the ability to penetrate any shield or something like that.
No. So again,
it's just an impenetrable shield, just defense, no powers of offense.
Yes.
They have technology that gives them impenetrable shields, but they just can't figure out offensive weapons.
Well, no. So the argument here is, again, it's not omnipotence. It's just if there's a balance of power, if you can generate X amount of energy and you have a shield that can deflect X amount of energy, then that would make essentially a impasse where they can't do anything. So the argument here is that it's not omnipotence. There's no omnipotence here. It's just a balance of energy, essentially.
A balance of energy. And there's no way to tip the balance. Essentially. I guess I wonder why that is. Yeah. Okay. Well, hey, this is interesting, TJump. These are some new thoughts to me. But I guess maybe if I tried to get us back a little bit on topic here, back to your moral realism and reasons to believe it and what sort of observations you might make that would confirm your hypothesis in the future. Let's see. I thought I had maybe one more thing to say about that, but let me try to remember. I'm not able to remember it right now. I guess maybe this could be a final thing to talk about. Is it really true that all involuntary restriction of will is wrong? And this utopia that you're imagining, this best of all possible worlds, you call it, would that really be good from a moral perspective? The way you describe it is yes. You what?
I'm going to go with yes on that one.
Well, let me try to understand it more. You say we will be pandas of the AIs, and they will just give us food, and you said sex videos. And basically,
it's a joke because pandas are literally shown like porn videos of panda to get them to reproduce. It's because they don't care enough to reproduce. It's a panda joke.
Yeah, well, unfortunately, I think it's like all too apt for humans, because as humans get more resources, it seems like what they want to do with their time is play video games and watch porn and eat rich
buffalo
foods.
Wings and pizza.
Eat buffalo wings, right?
It doesn't sound so bad, to be honest.
Yeah, so this is, I think we disagree, TJump. Because the
What? You don't
world,
like video games and porn and buffalo wings?
no, TJump, I don't. No, I don't like any of those things. And in fact, I think a world in which everybody just gets what they want all the time is a world that's apt to promote and facilitate um, just just bad, vicious character traits, and people will become hedonistic, self-indulgent. Um, I don't know what the word is. Just a bunch of bad adjectives.
So what? What is the thing we're losing with those?
If we were to take on those sorts of character traits,
Yeah.
oh, I think that we would
What's like the
lose
immoral consequence of that?
moral virtue. Oh, the consequences would be for our own characters. That's what it would be.
Well, I think that should be up to the individual. I don't think you should determine what other people's characters should be like. So I think it's immoral for you to try to determine a world where people's characters develop
Uh-huh.
in such a way that you find it moral. I think it's a more moral world where people can decide for themselves what kind of characters they want to develop. And if they want to eat Cheetos and play video games and watch porn, that is a morally superior world to one where they're forced to live in a world they didn't consent to be in, so that they develop some kind of character trait that they didn't consent to want to develop.
Yeah, so I was negatively evaluating certain kind of character traits, and then it sounded like your response was, you shouldn't do that.
Well, no, so I'm making an intuitive comparison. So if we compare a world that in order to develop character trait X, you have to put somebody in a situation that they didn't consent to be in. And then we have a different universe B where we don't do that to people. We don't force them into situations they don't consent to be in. To me, it seems like universe B is more moral. It's using an appeal to intuition here. So like I can say I can force this
Hold on.
person to eat an apple.
Why are you appealing to intuitions? I thought we agreed we couldn't trust them.
That's all we got.
That's all we got?
Yeah, pretty much.
Well, on my view, we can trust our moral intuition, so I'm in the clear. But on your view, we should dismiss them, as you say.
Well, no,
So
only
I'm
if
surprised to see them showing up here as evidence when you admit that like they're bad data points. They're not evidence.
well, they're equal evidence on both of our worldviews. Even I think they're less good than they are on your worldview, but either way, they're on equal standing on both of our worldviews. So
No, on your worldview, they're misleading indications that are the product of evolution that was interested only in adaptiveness, not truth. That is
no, I mean,
certainly
so
that is
just to
certainly
clarify,
not the case on my view.
we both have intuitions, and
Uh,
you see intuitions as reliable on for both of our intuitions, like presumably.
well, yeah,
Like you
assuming
think
that
I am
I'm right
connected to
about what the
God in
world,
some way,
yeah,
and
right.
that
So
because I'm
assuming
connected to
that
God,
my
my
view of the world
intuitions.
is, yes, assuming that my view of the world is true, your intuitions actually are reliable, and I wish you would see
Right.
that.
So,
But
so if your worldview is true, both of our intuitions are equally reliable, and if my worldview is true, both of our intuitions are equally reliable. It's just less than what they would be on your worldview. But
mhm.
either way, both of our intuitions are equally reliable. So the question, so it doesn't make a difference to my argument which worldview you adopt. So we can use the intuitions and say, if we compare these two worlds, one world where we're forcing a person into a situation where they're going to do something they didn't consent to doing to develop some character trait versus a universe where they get to decide whether they want to be in these situations or not. It seems like the universe where they get to decide is a morally superior world to one where we force them into these character developing situations.
Yeah. So I think we do disagree about that because I think that if constraining people's wills in various ways could produce character formation, character development, and help them develop virtues like courage and perseverance and generosity and empathy and so on, then it would be better to constrain their wills so as to produce these character traits rather than let them do what they want all the time, especially if that's going to lead them to just playing video games, watching porn, and eating buffalo wings.
Well, I'm not seeing how any of that is wrong. None of that's immoral. None of those things are bad in any way. And so it seems
Yeah.
like
Well,
the core of what immorality is seems to be the forcing people to do things they don't consent to. And
yeah.
if you force someone into a situation like, I don't know, in a world where they can be raped and murdered and suffer cancer and have worms eat out their eyes, that seems like you've done an immoral thing. It doesn't matter. I don't care what kind of character traits they
Yeah.
develop. They could develop the most beautiful character traits you think. I think that's immoral. What you did is an immorality. More importantly,
Yeah.
you can develop all those character traits without any of that. There are no character traits that cannot be developed in this world of buffalo wings without any of the suffering part. So any character trait you want to imagine, that can all be developed in this world I'm describing because it's one of the options. You can literally just choose, I'm going to go to the world God designed and with the Jesus thing and the suffering and live in that way. You can choose to do that. That's up to you. And so all of the potential character traits you could ever have, even if they're only possible in the God world, are still possible in my optional world where everything is consensual. The only difference is it has to be consensual, which seems to inherently make my world more moral because it has all the possibilities of your world. They're just optional.
Yeah. So just to be clear, I'm anti-worms eating eyes out. Just want to put that out there. I want to go on the record and take a strong stand against worms eating people's eyes out.
Wait, you disagree with God? What?
I'm sorry? God
God
has
did that.
worms. God has worms eating people's eyes out?
Yeah.
When did this happen, TJump?
I think it's happened sometime after Eve ate that apple and he got angry at the snake and cut its legs off.
When did the worms eat people's eyes out? Or you're
After
just
the
saying that
fall?
happens. Oh, you're saying that happens.
Because
Sometimes worms eat people's eyes out.
Because
So you're saying
God.
God permits sometimes worms do eat people's eyes out. God permits that to happen, you're saying.
Well, he created it, and the bears too.
And the bears too.
2 Kings 2:24.
Yeah, I'm with you with the bear story. I was a little alarmed at the worms eating eyes out story. So yeah, God permits a lot of these things. But what I thought we could focus on maybe what is a sort of case that would help to highlight a difference between our moral views. And I guess one such case is you got two people. One of them has devoted his life to video games, porn, and buffalo wings, because that's what he wants. One of them has devoted his life to developing various sorts of character traits. He's become very courageous and generous. He perseveres. He's got grit, and so on. Like, a lot of good character traits. And by the way, this guy has become, he has no perseverance. He's not courageous. He's a coward. He has difficulty empathizing with other people. Okay, but what's important for us to examine this case is both of these people are doing exactly what they want. Now, on your view, I think you have to say they are morally on a par.
Yep.
Yeah. Okay.
Absolutely. It's a D&D game. This guy picks the nerdy character. This guy picks the courageous hero. Like, okay.
Yeah. So you think they're morally on a par. We couldn't really reasonably evaluate one as better than the other.
Again, I think the term better there is better from your perspective, because I don't think if the person really likes being the nerdy character in a video game and playing, essentially because they're just playing a D&D game and they pick different characters, you can't really evaluate he's a better character in a D&D game. Like it's up to the individual what they like to play. So if he likes to do the nerdy character, sure. But
this is worse than just a nerdy character. I don't know too much. I don't really know anything about D&D except that it stands for Dungeons and Dragons. But this is worse than a nerdy character. This guy, as I said, is vicious in all sorts of ways.
Sure. Like you could pick evil characters in D&D too.
Okay, yeah. And so again, just on your view, if I were to say one of these is better than the other, you'd say, you're just sort of imposing your own opinions. There's really nothing morally different between these two characters. Each one's doing what he wants. So morally, they're on a par.
Yeah. So like, to me, it seems no different from picking in a video game the courageous hero with the bright blue, gold, and silver armor and saving old ladies versus picking the bad guy and summoning the undead.
Yeah, I guess the difference is what we're imagining here is not a game. It's not a video game. This is real life. And this person really is cowardly, selfish, watches porn all day, plays video games. You would really be that person. You wouldn't just be playing a character in a game. You would really be that person. Or you could be this person who's generous, courageous, perseveres. I wish I could think of more character traits. Kind, loving, so on. You could really be that person. And you're saying there's no moral reason to favor one over the other.
No, because there's no involuntary imposition of will either way. And so if the person wants to be one or the other, then that's simply their prerogative.
So I didn't really expect to change your mind on this, but I thought I would at least make it clear for the viewers. An implication of your view is there is no moral difference between these two types of person. And so, when deciding which sort of person do I want to be, there's no moral reason in favor of one over the other. You might choose one, you might choose the other, and that's the end of the story. I suggest to the viewers, at least, that it's obvious that you clearly should prefer to be the sort of person who's kind, generous, perseveres, courageous, and so on. There's obviously a moral reason to be that way rather than to be the type of person who watches porn and eats buffalo wings.
I think you need to play more video games because it's pretty obvious to most people that that's not the case. Like it's not immoral to be an evil character in a video game because you're not actually hurting anybody, right? So if there's
this isn't a game. We're talking about real life. I mean,
well, there's no difference here. The question is if your personal character traits, if I have a little access point in my brain and I can just set the traits I want, courage, heroic, save old ladies, or I can choose, I want to be villainous and selfish and the evil undead necromancer guy. There's no immoral. It's not immoral to pick any of these boxes. You can pick whatever you want and change it back later. Change it to a different character whenever you want. And so there's no moral significance here between picking the necromancer and the super cool hero guy with the perfect abs. Like there's no moral decision there. It's just whichever you'd like. Mm-hmm. It's not immoral to pick one or the other, and it can be temporary. You can pick one and go back to the other one.
Yeah, so I guess in a video game, there would probably be there's nothing immoral about playing as a villainous character. Because in that situation, you are not actually villainous. But even in the video game, if playing as a villainous character actually started changing you and making you villainous, then I think there probably would be something wrong with.
Well, let's take it a bit further. Say I could actually like plug the video game into my brain, and I can literally set the values I have in my brain or soul or whatever.
Yeah.
And so I select the villain character, and now it's going to align my brain with the villain character. So all the villain's desires are my desires.
Yeah.
I am now selfish and evil, and I want to conquer the world and summon zombies.
You shouldn't do that.
Why?
Because you'd be villainous. You'd be vicious. And that's a bad way. That's a bad way to be. Here, let me just ask you this, TJump. I don't know if you have children. You don't have to tell me. But supposing you do, or one day you will, what would you like your children to be like? Would you like them to be villainous, or would you like them to be virtuous?
I'd like them to be able to develop on their own and find their own sense of identity where they can actually enjoy and experience life to the fullest, to whatever extent they would like to do that, as long as it doesn't hurt others. So if they want to be villainous and they want to plug their brain in and be the zombie, that's fine. They can totally do. There's nothing wrong with that. As long as they're not hurting other people, they should be able to be adults and do what they think is fun. And if they get fulfillment out of that, more power to them.
So if your child came to you one day and said, they're in college trying to decide what to do with their lives, they're like, I could be a medical doctor. It would, be hard work, but I'd learn a lot of interesting things. I could help people in need. I could cure various diseases, or I could live in my basement and eat buffalo wings and watch porn and play video games all day. Dad, what should I do?
If he was a millionaire, I'd be like, do whatever you want. Be the video game guy. If you have no monetary requirements where you have to actually work for a living and you can just live in your basement and play video games, go for it. Have fun.
Okay.
The only reason I would prefer the doctor requirement is because we don't have infinite resources. You need money. More importantly, when I grow old, I'm going to need you to make money to take care of me. So you should be a doctor too, so you can pay for my old folks home. But if we had infinite resources, it's just a subjective choice of pick whichever one you want. There's no moral implication one way or the other. Mm-hmm. And that seems like super obvious.
Oh, wow. No, I was going to say the other way. I was going to say it's super obvious that it would be better for your child to be a medical doctor, help other people, develop various virtues. Even in a world where you've got infinite resources, it's better to be that way rather than to be self-centered, self-indulgent, narcissistic, shallow, hedonistic, just looking after one's own needs and wants all the time in a way that manifests itself as buffalo wings, porn, and video games all day. I think it's super obvious what sort of person you should be. But again, I guess I didn't expect to change your mind on this, and I thought it would be nice to place these two moral views in stark relief and then leave it up to the viewers to decide.
Yeah, I think it's a great example. I like it a lot. But I think for anybody who's played video games, they know, it's not immoral to pick the bad guy. There's nothing wrong with it.
Yeah. Hey, just for what it's worth, kind of changing the subject, I have played some video games. Yeah, I don't know. I was really into GoldenEye when I was younger. That was my era. Played some. I guess I played like Halo 1, whatever the first Halo was, and that's sort of when I dropped off. And I think it's because I got to an age where I started feeling like I could spend my time playing video games, or like I got to a point in my life where I felt like I had the power to start doing things that are actually productive. And then I didn't really reflect on this morally. I just lost all attraction to the idea of playing video games. But I know that other people are different. I'm just letting you know from my experience. I started thinking like there are more worthwhile things to do with my time, and I just lost the interest. The interest just went away.
Yeah, I totally agree. So I haven't played many video games in a while for a similar reason, but I think that's up to the individual, not up to me. I don't think there's an objective answer there. I think that
Yeah.
if someone does find value from playing video games, and because I was diagnosed with high functioning autism and Asperger's, and I know people with high functioning autism and Asperger's have very specific special interests. They like doing one thing. There's just they obsess over it. Is that one thing is the most important thing in the world to them. And I don't see I have any right to judge that one thing as being immoral or wrong. If they like playing video games and that's the thing that gives them joy and value in life because of how their brain works, they have every right to do that. And I have no right to say that they're lesser or immoral because they're not off working as a medical doctor. If that's the way that they get value out of life, they have every right and they're not in any way immoral for doing that.
Okay. So I guess that case would be a little different if the range of options available to one is such that like playing video games is either the best or tied for the best of all the options available to a person, then okay, maybe that would be different. But I'm thinking of people where their choices are more like, do I want to play video games, watch porn, and eat buffalo wings all day, or do I want to go to law school, be a medical doctor, start a family, something like that? And there, I think the choice is pretty clear.
What's
would
the
be better?
difference? Because to me, it seems like people are a spectrum, obviously, and some people on the far end of the spectrum only find joy from video games,
Mhm.
and they have every right to just play video games. And some
Mm,
people find more joy from video games than being a doctor, even if it's only like 1% more joy or whatever. Then
yeah.
they have a right to be like, I'm going to go play video games and not be a doctor. So it seems to me like each individual should have the right on their own to choose which set of values they want to try, even if it's something they hate. Maybe they want to do something that just causes them nothing but pain and suffering. Do the Christopher Hitchens thing. I want to try being waterboarded just to experience what it's like. They should have the option to do that. I don't think predetermining the correct decision is is moral. To me, it seems like the moral thing to do is to give every individual the option to try to pursue the path
Yeah.
they want to pursue.
Yeah, well, I don't know. I thought I just heard a different kind of moral view expressed there. But I think your view is just people should be able to do what they want all the time. And in a perfect world, everybody would be able to do what they want all the time.
As long as it doesn't infringe on other people's wills, yes.
As long as it doesn't infringe on other people's wills. Well, yeah, in this ideal world, you imagine we've all got these shields and whatnot. So
Well,
we won't be
you
infringed
literally
upon.
you get your own universe. You can do whatever you
Yeah,
want in your
you
own
get your
universe.
own
That
universe. You do
would be
whatever you
your
want.
shield. Your shield.
Yeah, and so there, I mean, yeah, so there, I think the thought experiment is just imagine two people. One of them exercises their will in vicious ways. One of them exercises their will in virtuous ways. I think there's a moral difference here. You say, as long as they're both freely exercising their wills, no moral difference. But I
and
think we've
not
covered
harming
that.
others.
Yeah, sure, not harming others. As I think we've covered that, we don't have to keep going into that. But what I sense is maybe under the surface here is maybe you've got a view according to which, like, basically consent is the only morally relevant consideration, and the only if we're wondering whether a situation is moral or immoral, or an action is moral or immoral, let's just check and see, was anybody's will being constrained? Did everybody consent to what's happening here? And if so, if everybody consented, then it's fine, nothing immoral. If something happened that somebody didn't consent to, then maybe we've got some immorality going on here. Is that roughly the view?
Sure, yeah, at the best of
Yeah.
all
So
possible worlds, at the extreme.
yeah. So I guess I'll just run one more case by you, and then maybe that'll be my last attempt to to try to convince you or your viewers that I think this is a deeply morally mistaken view of the world. Have you heard of this? It's pretty graphic. I don't know if I want to share everything, but have you heard of this case of this German guy, Armin Maives? Have you heard of him, Armin Maives?
Sounds familiar.
Okay, he
Is that the guy who paid somebody else to kill him and eat him?
Well, no, there was no money involved, and he was the one who did the killing and the eating. He put an ad on the internet saying, "Hey, anybody want to come over and engage in some sex cannibalism? And I will eat you." And somebody answered the ad and was like, "Yes, I would like that." And that happened. And what was peculiar about the case, or what was interesting from a legal perspective, is he was very careful to get the person to give informed consent. And we had it on video. He had like a signed contract, and he videoed the whole thing as it went down. And so the reason I bring that case up is it looks like nobody's consent was violated in this case.
Yeah, if the victim was in a healthy state of mind, as long as he wasn't like mentally handicapped and
I think that
was
was
an
a question
adult.
in the case, but yeah, suppose he was in a healthy state of mind, and that
Yeah.
is what he wanted.
Yeah, so he was a healthy state of mind, perfect adult, completely consensual. It's like, I would like you to kill and eat me. And you're like, okay, then no, there's nothing immoral there. That's completely fine. He was
Okay.
just assisted suicide plus voluntary food production.
Okay, so I guess I did expect you to just embrace that conclusion. But again, I'll just suggest maybe for the viewers that at the very least, I think we could say there is a better way they could have spent their time. And if so, then now we're evaluating the case, we're evaluating it morally and saying it at least could have been better. It's less optimal than it could have been. But I think that your view would entail even that there's no way this could have been any better. There's no way in which it's deficient. Everybody consented, so nothing's missing for it to be moral. There's no deficiency here. So you wouldn't even agree that there's a better way they could have spent their time than sex cannibalism?
Better, I don't think is the right word there. I don't think better fits, because better, I think, is the best optimal solution is everybody doing what they consent or desire to do. So if the person wanted to die, the best solution is to help him to die, assisted suicide, as long as he's in a healthy state of mind and a consenting adult. To force him to live against his will would be immoral. It'd be immoral to force him to live, essentially. And so killing him is a moral action in that case. He wants to die. He's a healthy state of mind. Killing him is a moral thing to do. And then his body doesn't care if it's eaten. And if you want to eat it and he voluntarily consents to give you the rights to his body after he's dead to eat it, also moral. So it's also
wanted
moral.
To really quickly add that the cannibalism actually started when the guy was alive, and that was part of what they consented to.
If that was consented to, perfectly fine also.
Doesn't matter on your view, right?
Doesn't matter. So as long as they were consenting adults and they were only affecting their own bodies, their own rights, and not hurting anybody else, and they're perfectly healthy mentally, then yeah, that's fine.
Okay, so just to be explicit, then my argument is, if TJump's moral theory is true, then in this Armin Maive's case, there's no way they could have spent their time that would have been better. That was the best use of their time.
That language doesn't fit. Nothing in there those were moral actions. They were not immoral actions. That doesn't mean there could obviously be more moral actions. Like there'd be better ways. Like they could potentially be doing things to help other people that would benefit more wills, which could be moral. So like the most moral action you could do would be one that would assist the most wills at any given time. And so there could obviously be better things, more moral things that can happen. That's why this is not the correct term there. But that doesn't matter. You're not obligated to do the most moral thing at any given time. You're not obligated to help the most people at any given time. So if you want to be amoral and do nothing, that's fine. Or if you want to be just do whatever you want, that's fine. So the fact that there could be other actions that could benefit more wills at any given time is irrelevant. The question is there was no immoral action that took place, and moral actions to assist each other's will in that case that did take place. So that was fine.
So nothing immoral happened. Might you say that, if that's what both of those people wanted, then that's what they should do? Would you say that?
I don't use shoulds because I don't think oughts are entailed in morality, but they should be free to do it. Yes.
They should be free to do it. Would you say that's what they had most reason to do because that's what they wanted to do?
Maybe. I have no idea.
I'm trying to make this argument as bad as possible for you. But you'd at least say they didn't do anything wrong.
Yeah, they didn't
do anything immoral. Yeah, from a moral point of view, nothing to criticize here. Yeah, okay. Premise 2, I think they did something wrong. They did something immoral, something to criticize here. They should not have done that. They didn't
What
have good reason to do that. They definitely should have done something else instead. Yeah.
what was the immoral thing they did?
Oh, I guess it was the sex cannibalism. Yeah. Even though they wanted to. What they wanted was bad. They wanted to do something bad.
Why was it bad?
There may be no deeper reason. Here's something I've learned in the study of ethics. Even trying to prove that murder is wrong is really hard to do if you asked for a deeper reason beyond the fact that it's murder. And for example, if I asked you, like, well, what makes it good to get what you want? What makes it good? I think you'd
Law of
say, no,
physics. But
no, it's not a law of physics. I think you'd say that's sort of the bottom. That's the bottom of the theory. It's just good to get what you want. Isn't that obvious? Okay, I think it's obvious that um, cutting off body parts of somebody while they're still alive, cooking them and eating them with the person, and then killing the person and eating the person, I think that's pretty obviously wrong. And if you ask for deeper reasons, I might have a hard time articulating them. But I'm just floating premise 2 out there for your viewers to consider. And if they think that it's true, that from a moral perspective, there's something to criticize about this case, then they can run the modus tollens and reject the TJump moral theory.
yeah, it seems obvious. Like, given a world where people have the freedom to do those things versus forcing them in a world where they cannot do those things, the freedom is more moral. That world where they have the option to choose for themselves what they want is a morally superior world, and your world
Yeah. That might
seems
be
wrong.
that's a separate question. Like, to what degree should we force people to do certain things? But what we're wondering now is, given that they had the freedom to use their wills, are there better and worse ways of using wills? Is it possible to want to do something wrong, even if the thing that you want doesn't conflict with anybody's wills or desires? Is it possible to just want to do something wrong? And I thought one case that we considered was, what if somebody just wants to play video games, watch porn, and eat buffalo wings all day? Yeah, I think that's we can criticize that from a moral perspective. And then I sort of like turned the dial up to 11 and said, well, what if somebody wants to do this? Armin Maives. And even in that case, you were like, nothing to criticize here.
Right. So I think, the better thing is where I'm a little lost. So, like, better for me is more assistance of will. So say you only want to play video games and eat buffalo wings. Say you're playing a co-op game and someone wants to learn how to be a boss and you teach them how to be a boss. You're doing a moral action. So even in the video game case, there are better things you can do. There's more people you can help. And so the level of morality is contingent on the amount of will that you help, which is independent of whether you're playing video games or not. And so there's obviously more moral outcomes that you can do, but that's irrelevant. I don't think you're obligated to do the most moral thing you can do in a situation.
Yeah, I was imagining maybe your best of all possible worlds, where nobody needs my help to get what they want. I can just do whatever I want all the time. And suppose I decide to devote my life to
Right. So the same thing applies
something
in
immoral.
that world, in the best of all possible worlds, where everyone has what they want. You can still limit yourself by turning up the difficulty on a video game and wanting help in learning how to beat the video game. And so you can still have moral actions in this universe. You can still help other people to do things. Say a person wanted to die in the best way possible. I want my universe to be destroyed. I want it to be implode. I want to see what's after. Still moral to help them. So even in that case, everything would still apply. And you can still do more moral actions and help more people. But again, there's no obligation to do the action that leads to the most assistance of will in this world. As long as there's no involuntary position of will, that's good enough.
Okay. I think I understand the view. I don't want to beat a dead horse here. Even if the horse would like that, I wouldn't do, wouldn't do it.
If the horse would like it, it's moral.
Yeah, I guess. Yeah, I was just sort of joking. I'd have to think about that case. Then maybe it wouldn't really count as beating. It would count as a kind of petting if the horse likes it. Anyway, yeah, we get the idea. I don't want to belabor the point. I think we've covered everything. You have these moral intuitions you're willing to grant. They don't really count as evidence in favor of moral realism. And in fact, we shouldn't really trust our moral intuitions given our evolutionary history. But maybe one day we'll get evidence that your moral theory is true, because it issues certain predictions that you're optimistic one day will be confirmed. In light of proposed counterexamples, you're willing to say, These are not counterexamples. I was just trying to sum up the conversation so far. Does that sound? That sounds fair.
Sure.
All right.
I'd like to do an analysis of your moral theory, see which one comes out better. That'd be fun.
Oh, do you mean like right now, or?
We can do it later. We've been going
Okay.
for like almost 2 hours, so.
Yeah, I kind of have to go, if that's all right.
Sure.
But maybe some other time.
Definitely. It was great having you on.
It was a pleasure talking with you, TJump.
Absolutely, you as well. Do you want to give links to where people can find more of your work and stuff?
You can follow me on Twitter. If you just search for my name on Twitter, you'd find me. You can find my website with all my papers. If you just, I guess this triggers some people when I say, if you just Google my name, you'll find my website, because I don't know, it sounds pretentious or something, but it's because my name's unusual. My name's sort of unusual. So that's why I used to actually have like, a designated URL, but I stopped doing that. So now I just say, search for my name. Usually the first result is that website with all my papers, if you're interested in reading that sort of thing. All right.
It's true for me too, but it's just because I'm famous.
Yeah, if you search TJump, then I'm sure they'd find you pretty quickly.
Awesome. Thanks again for coming on. Really appreciate it. And I hope you have a wonderful day.
All right. You too.